Popularity is a great question. It's just an intriguing question because I think especially now in the kind of consumer capitalist culture where taste and sometimes quality is being measured in dollars and in numbers and in ratings and box office and all of that. And sometimes popularity is just taken to be sufficient kind of judgment. It's like, well, everybody liked that, and that movie made a ton of money. Everybody loved that movie. And sometimes those movies that everybody loved actually turn out to be really good, or I think they're really good. Sometimes they're not. But popularity has a funny way of correcting or reversing itself. It's always fascinating to me how, like, when I was a kid, every single person, it seemed, bought this album, Frampton Comes Alive, right? And it was like the biggest selling album. I mean, I'm dating myself. I'm a very old person, but it was on vinyl. And then, like, 5 years later, you could not give a copy of that. Like, no used record store would take your copy of that in trade or for any, and like, just bins were full of it. Everybody was just like, what? No. And you see that, you see that with popular music. You see that with movies. I mean, a few years ago, like, Avatar, made $1 billion, and everyone was going to see it. It even showed up on critics' top 10 list. It was just this sort of frenzy about Avatar, and now nobody talks about it. It's not even that people hate it. People just don't care about it. So popularity is a weird and fickle kind of index of things. So it's never identical to quality, although sometimes it coincides with it. And I've been particularly fascinated with how judgments change over time and how things that were very popular fall by the wayside, but also how the opposite happens. How movies or books or paintings or music or whatever that was ignored or mocked or rejected at its own moment resurfaces and comes to seem, so wonderful and to have such great value. I mean, I write a little bit in the book about Moby Dick, which is just one of my favorite examples of this. Herman Melville was a best-selling author of nautical adventures, and he wrote this big, philosophically ambitious novel about a whaling voyage, and the critics at the time basically, sort of rejected it, and it was forgotten. He was forgotten. It was completely vanished. By the end of the 19th century, it was there was one copy of it in a library somewhere that was in, like, the fishing section of the library. And now, everyone who studies American literature reads it, and it's sort of by consensus one of the great masterpieces of the American literary imagination. How did that happen? What was the critical process? And that is an example of what criticism is and how it works in a way both at its worst and its best. That criticism, it was critics who misjudged this book and cast it aside and said, this is impossible. This is 800 pages of, like, philosophical gobbledygook, and there's not really any great whale hunting in here, and until the very end, and cast it aside. And then it was critics also who, so to speak, fished it up out of the deep, out of oblivion, and put it back on everybody's shelf.